A student invests in education in UK, 1.5 years of post-study work, and then it's Tata bye-bye. There is a new ingenious scam called Search Fund. A student applies and says, oh, I've got $50,000 in my bank account. Now that $50,000 is in a genuine bank account of student's father. It's the same name of someone else.
Ravi has cooked UK, and this can be the punchline for the series.
You must have met many Australians. Students don't mind a criticism. None of these countries have anything called ESOS. International students working in Australia have the highest minimum wage of any country.
Great, guys. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever, which part of the world you are watching and tuning in. First of all, thank you so much, for being part of this web series and continuation of my podcast, which I've been running for a while. And today, without being any fluff, I want to start with destination and also, the idea why we are doing this. And I would like to invite, my co-host Shrikant. This is also a new format we are doing it. I have not done this and that too online. So I hope all the stars and all the technical know-how works well. And Shrikant, I would like to start with you. Why you are collaborating with University Living, and especially at this point in time when there's too much of noise, and everyone's like holding off with their visas, holding off with their applications. So do you mind sharing the background behind doing this?
Yeah, absolutely, Saurabh. And firstly, a very, very warm welcome to Ravi Lochan Singh, someone I admire very much and respect a lot as well in the industry. I'm in this industry for 20 years, and Ravi is twice as much as that. So it's great to have you here, Ravi, firstly. And awesome. And thank you, Saurabh. Having spent all these years in Australian education, I felt it was timely that we try and decode some of the things that you will not find in a university prospectus or a brochure. And the only way I thought, we could do this by getting some international thought leaders in that Australia space, so that students, agents, everyone who's associated with the industry can actually get to know a lot more about Australia, the intricacies of working in that environment, as well as the challenges and so on. So really, it's I think driven by the passion as well as the fact that Australia sits like a very sort of secluded spot compared to other countries is what drove this collaboration, I guess.
No, absolutely. Thank you, Shrikant. And of course, I mean, me being me, there's a script, but I don't like to follow script because scripts are great for panels and conferences and lots of, as you mentioned, Shrikant, this is a session beyond marketing narratives. So I'll jump on to the first question, and of course, before that, I always, really appreciate and like any opportunity to interact with Ravi, which I have got pleasure to do a podcast in person, and that's where we coined this, OGs of higher education, been into this for 30 years. So how it's going, Ravi? How was 2025 for you, individually and for Australia ecosystem as a whole?
I think, firstly, again, always great to talk to you guys, and I think it's a session when I don't start speaking from a script. I don't even have a script. I don't even know the questions that you're going to ask me. The way I look at it is that 2025 was better than what I had expected. Now, this is from my personal point of view. I do hear stories from the market about recent visa issues and couple of other murmurs, but then the reality is that it could have been far worse. If you remember last year, there were talks about caps. The government changed in Australia earlier this year, somewhere around March, April, May. We knew that it would change, and then the new government is basically a continuation of the previous government, came back with a much larger majority. We knew that the policies will remain. So I think there was a bit more understanding of what would happen. We knew that caps won't be there, but kind of informal caps will still be there because of the way prioritization would work. So we knew about that, and that helped us plan a bit more. Second thing which became very clear is the importance of India for Australia. I think that is quite a definite now. As you hear the clamor around Trump, his policies, India has got much more closer to Australia in the recent years. And and I would give full credits to the governments in both the countries for having made the effort towards the Free Trade Pact by encouraging bilateral arrangements, including defense pacts. So when you really think of it in that context, the political geopolitical situation has helped India as a source market for Australia. But whenever we have such increase, there will be some other issues which will come in. And that's what happened in 2025. The local Australians have expressed concern around cost of living. There has been a narrative, rightly or wrongly, but people do believe that it is the increased migration which has led to housing shortages. The moment we talk about migration, international students become temporary migrants and get bracketed in the same thing. So what's important is that as on the receiving end, international education has been a kind of a scapegoat for all the ills that a society might have. At the same time, cost of living pressures have increased even for Indian students. The foreign exchange rate between India and Australia has jumped quite a bit. It was around 50 rupees, went to 55, stayed at 55 rupees to a dollar for a fairly long time, and now it has gone past 60 rupees. So the moment you go from 55 to 60, it's a 10% increase in cost. And then there is also the tuition fees which are increasing in Australia. So you add both these things lead to the question around return on investment. So if you look at more recent student sentiment surveys conducted by IDP and Navitas and various other bodies, you will find cost of living and return on investment as a very important factor coming up in 2026. And along with, as Shrikant and you would know very well, there has been other issues around visas which have come up in the recent months. So next year is going to be interesting. This year we closed at, I mean, personally at Global Reach, we closed at slightly less than last year, but more or less the same in many of our locations. Indian student market remained stable. Nepal fell by a 10 percentage point for us. Bhutan fell quite significantly, but that was expected because it had had a very big increase a couple of years ago. So that impact came down for us. Bangladesh and Sri Lanka did well actually because they had very high visa success rate, and both these countries increase in student numbers to Australia. So these are the locations where I operated. Is largely the Indian subcontinent minus Pakistan. So this region that I operate in overall did quite all right. India was good. I mean, I know a lot of people might say, oh, India could have been better. Yes, it could have been better if we are just looking at in terms of numbers here. But we were okay. I mean, Indian students are still looking at Australia, and post Trump and post the drama that's happening in the US, even some quality students have started looking at Australia, which is a very, very pleasing outcome that I see. Students who would have never considered Australian universities are now putting it amongst their portfolio of consideration. So that's the way I look at the next 1 year.
So I zoom out a bit, and that was pretty elaborative and detailed, and that's why I like about speaking with you, because you don't always show the rosy picture. You do talk about where things have not gone up, and you are very open about it. But if I zoom out and I'm talking to a couple of you who have studied there, like Shrikant is studying in Australia, you of course have built empire out of Australia by studying there. So you guys both are a personified of a student who believe that if they get a chance to go abroad, especially in Australia, how they can build their career over a period of time. So what was it? Why was it for Ravi? What was it for you for Australia? And again, Shrikant, why Australia? Why did you choose Australia at that point in time?
Well, I'll
Probably
let
start with,
Shrikant go
yeah.
first. Yeah, Shrikant, you can go ahead.
Well, thanks, Ravi, and thanks, Saurabh, for that question. I think, see, I'll be honest here. When I started thinking of Australia, this was about 20 years ago, and it wasn't my first choice. My first choice was US, as most students from India, I guess, want to, choose a destination. And because I did not have a 16 years of education, my obvious next choice was Australia or any other country. Now, the interesting part is when I thought of Australia, I didn't want to go to a Sydney or Melbourne because I was very strategic, very planned in my, future. And I said, if these markets are the ones that are popular, and there's another city like Perth or Brisbane where there's promise for future, I would like to look at those kind of cities. So my choice of Australia was more of a decision after not making it to the top, top university or top destination. But I absolutely don't regret that. In fact, I'm very lucky and fortunate that I ended up in Australia and ended up in the right city, Queensland, where Ravi also spent his time as a student. And the biggest value proposition, in my view, is that Australia offers a very transparent and clear path towards staying back after you finish your studies, and that's for your post-study work visa. As well as there are no uncertainties around if you have a PR or if you have a temporary residency and you're back in your home country for something, you may be restricted at the border and thrown back to your home country like it happens in the US. And I think that level of certainty and that level of promise of what Australia can offer to your future after your studies is the most attractive thing to me, because no matter how much people talk about ranking and focus on the course and focus on the university and blah blah blah, the ROI needs to be a realistic. It shouldn't be a ranking based plan. It should be how you're going to recover that money you've spent on your education. And that promise is very strong, very compelling, and very transparent with Australia. So that's really my sort of view why Australia and what makes it so special.
Yeah,
And Ravi,
yeah. And I think Shrikant, what Shrikant has summarized towards the end, I think as the main uh, bells and whistles for Australia, I think it's pretty definite. I think when I look at it, and I will come back to why I went to Australia a little later, because mine is not really the way Indian students think today. Indian students are far more informed. They are they've got the internet on their hands. It wasn't there when I was going overseas to study, and they plan much better. I think we are much more mature at a younger age than what we were 35 years ago when I had gone as a student. Now, whether I would have gone to Australia or not, that's a different thing altogether at that time, because I will again come back as to why I went to Australia. But here, today, when a student is going overseas to study, now you've got to look at there are two times when they go overseas. One, when they go after year 12, and the other when they go after a bachelor's. The student who goes after year 12 has a longer period that they need to study, sometime between 3 and 4 years. And they, of course, have to plan a little bit more in terms of their financial ability to fund their studies. Then comes the students who are going at the postgraduate level. And for those who are going at postgraduate level, it's almost always their last qualification in their life. It has to lead to some kind
some
of
outcome,
work or a way to reach
yeah.
something else. And you've got to also remember that students who've been going to Australia have largely been going at the postgraduate level. It is changing now with a lot more international students, international schools in India. There are students who are going at undergraduate level, but historically it used to be almost 75-25% split. But 75% of the students going from India would be going at the postgraduate level. And if you look at South India, it was almost 90-10 split, where 90% used to go at postgraduate level. So in India, we have a lot of options at the undergraduate level. There are engineering colleges galore in Maharashtra, in Karnataka, in other parts of South India. So students do tend to find something or other at the undergraduate level. So once they finish their engineering or they're finishing their engineering, they're getting very panicky. They want to get into something which can assure some kind of a livelihood thereafter. Now, if they go to the US, and which will always remain the number one destination or aspiration for an Indian student. In US, you've got over 3,000 universities. So not everybody is landing up at the Harvard and the Stanford and the Wharton. Most of them are going to fairly unknown schools. Large numbers are going there, and they are. It is no longer the question that okay, आपने विलायत गए हो, you've just gone overseas. That's not the term anymore. People want to know where you studied, what you want to do thereafter. Now, in the US, there is something called OPT. So, if somebody goes to US, you go and study a STEM program, then you want to work for a couple of years and then hope to get a H-1B visa. Once you've got the H-1B visa, it's like a lottery, maybe 10, 15, 20 years before you can get a green card. Now, why I'm mentioning this is that when we look at Canada or Australia or New Zealand, the green card equivalent is referred to as permanent residency. When you don't change your citizenship, but you become a permanent resident of that country. Now, in case of Australia, I'm not trying to say that we promote students to come to Australia to gain permanent residency, but it's a fact that around large proportion of Indian students are looking at utilizing the post-study work, and many of them would happily explore career options which can help them move towards permanent residency in Australia. Now, this is a reality, and it has been a reality throughout, and we cannot go away from that. Yes, there are students who would study at top ranked Australian universities, which is like a brand to them, and will come back and join their family businesses in India, which is there now. And there is about 10, 15, 20% students who are like that, who are coming to Australia. And yes, they'll use the post-study work for a couple of years of work experience. And then even if they have to go back home, they don't have a problem in doing that. But there are large chunks of Indian students who are from middle class income bracket who have taken education loans to fund their education. Education loans in India would charge them anywhere between 8 and 12% interest per year, which is about 3 times the rate of interest that Australian banks charge when they give you money. So when you have that kind of a paradigm, you would like to work for a few years so that you can repatriate any loans, or I mean, you can pay back any of your loans that you or your parents might have taken, so that you are actually not in a deficit even if you have to go back home. And and I tell you, Australia too has skill shortages. And this is something which sometimes in this whole rush, we give an impression that Indian students are only taking advantage of studies to find ways into Australia. But we have to remember that Australia is a population of about 25 million people, out of which the birth rate or the growth rate is less than 1.5 there. So unless you have a growth rate or birth rate more than 2, you are not, like you're not even replacing the population. So you have to import manpower from around the world. And Australia has chosen to import skilled manpower, which meets their skill shortage list. So you've got to remember this very clearly. It is a win-win for Australia too, that they have people who have studied there, invested in the Australian system, who have paid money for almost everything, including healthcare. They've taken insurance. They've not been a liability on Australian system at all. They brought foreign exchange. After that, they worked for about a few years on post-study work when they have again not used the local Medicare or anything of that kind. They've had a health cover to cover their expenses. And then thereafter, if they have a skill which Australia requires, they are possibly the best migrant the country can have.
But
And
then
this is,
why? I'm sorry interrupting here. But why this is so hard for Australia government or Australia locals to understand? Is it a narrative which has been playing so hard?
see,
It's a
I tell you, I think it'll be wrong to say the Australian governments don't understand. I think Australian governments on both sides of politics understand that very well. In fact, if you remember, both the Liberal and the Labour, the two major party formations, have always had an active migration policy. The Liberal, which is the opposition, has promoted import of workers for restaurants and shops and whole lot of small businesses, and the current Labour government is also about promoting skilled workers coming into Australia. But then you've got to remember they have to fight an election too. They have to win an election. Now, it's easy to say, oh, we'll stop people from coming, but how will you replace those workers? The Australian population, the kids that are growing up, including our kids, we tend to take subjects which are very different to what the Australian, workforce
Local
requires. So this is a reality. Yeah, go on, Shrikant. You were saying something.
No, sorry. I was just going to add very quickly to that Saurabh's question, and I love that question when he says, "Why is it so hard to understand?" I think, as you know, sitting on the fence, it is actually a great question because the only sort of, I won't say grudge. It's a harsh word to use here, but the only thing that I've noticed in the last 5 years is the acceptance of working more collaboratively with India is at its peak, and I feel like it's partly driven by necessity than an objective and a goal. And I'll put China in the mix here because I've been with the Australian education industry for as many years to see that universities would set their annual budgets revolving around China, and in a way, I would use this word, underestimated what India can offer. And there were limitations for certain universities. I don't want to name them here on the show, but certain universities would put a ceiling limit on the number of Indian students they would allow to come in. And from that era to now, where there's high-level collaborations, TNE left, right, center, branch campuses being opened in India, it's a positive and good change, but partly it is driven by the need and necessity. And Ravi is absolutely right. You will need skilled people. So a country like India, you've got skills, you've got excellent English, not non-native speakers, but still very good English skills. So I think that again explains why there's an additional 1 year of post-study work visa, and so things like those.
Yeah. So let me bring an
Saurabh,
in the
Saurabh, but I'll
yeah,
just
yeah,
talk to
Ravi.
you what I was talking about earlier.
Please.
So in the past, when Shrikant or I would have come to study, I came about 10 years before Shrikant, but when we came to study, we would come to do business programs. We might come for some engineering type. IT was only growing at that time. Thereafter, all over the world, India was seen as a source of IT manpower. So, like all the IT companies. But today, when you look at it, 7 to 8 out of 10 nurses that Australia has are from India and Nepal. Almost 50% of doctors, including the locally educated doctors, are from families of Indian or migrant backgrounds. This will include even Sri Lankans to an extent. Now, when you look at it, so healthcare is largely seen as a support coming from Indian
India.
or Indian background migrants.
Yeah.
You've got aged care, which is taking care of elderly, again, largely from the subcontinent. You send your child to a child care, which is like a creche there. Most of the workers in child care are migrants. So today, when you really think of it, this is where our migrant community is totally in the open. We are not a hidden population. We are seen in the front. You order anything on Uber in the evening, the Uber's network works on migrants, includes the Uber deliveries. You order anything at the shopping center like Woolies or Coles, most of the tellers and the people are from the subcontinent. So for an Australian, and when I say Australian, I'm an Australian too, and Shrikant is an Australian too. I'm not talking about that. When you say the typical European origin Australian, when they see everywhere is people of our types there, then you get a feeling, hey, have we been taken over? So for someone who is not so literate, who's not so aware, come on, we haven't really barged in.
Feeling.
none of the, very hardly any Indians are on dole in Australia. We are not, dole is like the benefit that the government gives to those who are unemployed. And we are not there. And none of the homeless on the street you see will be people from our part of the world. We are also not piling up the protection visa category, which is the refugees and the asylum. So when you think of it, so educate. Now I'll go back to your question. Why is it so difficult for the government and the people? Government know it. Government know it. People, again, it depends on whom we talk to. Come on, it's the same thing in any part of the world. Yeah. I mean, I come from a state in India where the government gets voted in because you give them 10,000 rupees in the bank account and they'll vote for you. So I think it's a very, very different kind of a context. They have to fight an election. They have to win an election. Now the narrative has to change. Right now, I think the biggest challenge for people like Shrikant and me in Australia is there is a sudden feeling that we really don't need that many migrants. There are protests happening in different cities in Australia against migration. And just last week, I think the what has happened at Bondi Beach is something which is like really, really a bothersome incident, because this is the second biggest, you can say, a terrorist activity which has happened in Australia. About 15 to 16 people lost their life, 15 innocent ones, and one of the others was one of the terrorists. But I think what bothered me is that this time the origin of the two people who attacked were Indian origin. One of them was born in Australia and bred in Australia. The other one migrated from India 27 years ago. But the fact is, both had no connection to India as such, other than the fact that their grandparents might have come from there. But they had got radicalized in Australia. So, but for an average person on the street, it doesn't matter. So average person on the street just goes out and says, "Oh, migrants! See, they've come in, they've done this." So this is where I think the responsibility of the government has to be there. And I personally think that we have a stable government in Australia for the next 3 years, and it will possibly continue thereafter. And I think they will do their best as possible not to paint it in a way that it becomes a migrant and non-migrant situation. We recently hosted the Australian ministers in India. They had a great time. They visited Hyderabad, they visited Amritsar, they met with students, they met with education agents. And in our informal discussions with them, it's quite clear they fully understand what the situation on the ground is. Indian students will always remain welcomed in Australia, and not just in 2026, but I think for years to come. Indian community is again becoming a very attractive magnet for many of these students. They are attracting their nephews, nieces, family members to come to Australia. So I think uh, India is in play at this point of time. And just briefly, I think the first part was, why did I go to Australia? Frankly, I went at the age of 21, 22 from Delhi University. Uh, like Shrikant, my option was to go to the US. I had taken my GMATs, and I had an admission with the Duke University. It was a deferred admission because I had to do my fourth year of undergraduate. My undergraduate was from Delhi University, which was a 3 year at SRCC, and I would have been required to do one more year of study and then go there. So my options were very limited at that time. I could have gone to the UK or I could have gone to another country, but I just didn't want to go to UK or the US because my father had gone to those countries to study. I wanted to find a new country where nobody else in my family had gone to. So that's the story. Somehow, I think everything happened for a reason. Um, there was just, I had not even heard of Australian universities before. There was no internet at all at that point of time. And I just don't know why I made that decision. But today I would say that was possibly the best decision made in my life. I made some great friends. My family grew up there. And I think I would say that Australia is today the best destination a student can choose.
I want to ask you a question there, Ravi. Obviously, we all know we are all fans of Australia. That's why we are doing this series. But quite honestly, uh, from your perspective, just want to understand. Students also ask whether Australian degree travels well globally, and how are Australian qualifications perceived. Every university has a ranking and job assistance and blah blah blah. But coming outside of Australia, what is your view? How valuable is an Australian degree? And I always say, yes, it's great, blah, blah, blah. But as a university, that's always going to be a biased view. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, Shrikant, I think it is a real question. And as I said some time back, that there was a time just going overseas was good enough. You are foreign returned, you had studied in Vilayat. But today, the universities are well known. Now the question actually is changing very rapidly. Where did you study is more important. Just studying in the US or Australia is not important at all. So for a student who is going to study and is coming back to India, I think it's an extremely important question to understand, to look at where are you studying. I mean, going to all these dodgy colleges or even unknown institutions is not what a family or a kid wants if he's going to come back. And education is a very brand thing, Shrikant. It's very, even in India, if somebody asks me, where did you study in Delhi? I rarely say Delhi University. I say SRCC.
SRCC.
Because SRCC is a brand in Delhi. And it's a brand in India. So it is a question, it's the same thing with schools. If you go to I think that's what I told Saurabh about his daughter also at one point of time. We were having a chat. I think there are two. Education sticks with you for your life. Where you study makes a lot of difference. But if your aim to study is to find a way into working and living in Australia, then what matters is what you study,
What you study.
and you cannot pile up debts on your family. So you want to find the right price point also. So I think it depends on whom we are talking to. If the aim is that I want to do a course in say computer science, and it's not a research course which is going to be accredited by ACS, then I find the institution which meets that requirement. I mean, there's no point of taxing yourself beyond your means. So that's my answer to the question around how well it is perceived. It will take time. In 1990, when some of us went to study, there were 200 students who had gone from India to study there. Out of which 150 must have got scholarships under Colombo Plan or something else at that point of time. There were 50 of us, bigade hue bachche, who had gone somewhere to study. But the reality is, it depends on us how well the universities will be picturized. Today, it gives me a lot of design. Now, I have my own questions around TNEs and the university campuses being set up because I read it differently. But the fact, it gives me a joy when the government of India says that the best ranked foreign university to set up a campus in India is UNSW in Bangalore. And that turns heads in India. At least it brings the focus back that now we've got about 20 odd universities who have signed MOUs to set up campuses, out of which there are 10 UK names like York and Liverpool and Southampton. But when the government of India says that the highest ranked university to set up a shop here or set up a campus here is UNSW at the 20th rank worldwide, I think it's a recognition of sorts. I think things are changing.
I interrupt you here, Ravi,
Yeah.
and Shrikant, seems like, I'm trapped with I'm starting getting hypnotized with Australia as a whole, and I'm a neutral guy, right?
That's the
For
plan,
me,
Saurabh. What do you think? Why Ravi and I'm here?
so let me play a devil advocate here. So you mentioned about we started with Australia, and then of course we talk about US. What's your take on UK? Because Ravi, you also do Australia, UK, and other countries, right? And Shrikant, you have so many of friends who are UK reps, or you deal with students who talk or compare all these 4 or 5 English speaking, or now in non-English speaking countries. So what's your take on why they choose Australia, why they are choosing Australia, especially when the visa refusal is at a high or at a peak at this point in time?
Shrikant, go ahead before I'll be the
Before
top.
before you
Yeah.
shoot the duck down.
Yeah.
Uh, well, look, I think Saurabh, I'll keep my answer brief. I really want Ravi's view here, but the visa refusals are a transient thing, in the sense that there are these bunch of refusals coming through at some point of time. But if you look at the average, 12 months, how many applied, what is the visa grant rate? We are hovering well above 85%, even at difficult times. And for a country to grant 85% visas out of, all the applications, I think it's noteworthy. If a country is rejecting 50% of visas, then that starts to raise questions. But broadly, if the government's still in that zone of 85, 90% global visa grant rate, I think it's a fair, not a fair, but it's a strong indication that we welcome international students. There will be these waves coming through on and off, and Ravi commented on one of my LinkedIn posts that some correction is always good. I remember those words very vividly, Ravi, because that's precisely what happens. There has to be a correction. You can't just put things on auto mode. You have to have a manual intervention, fix things, and that's, I think, what the visa refusals are at the moment. But yeah, I think over to Ravi in terms of
Yeah, I mean,
what you
I'll
said.
get back to the UK thing, but I just want to pick up from what Shrikant mentions. He talks about visa refusals, and I don't want to. There have been some unfortunate visa outcomes. Some students who should have got visas have been denied visas, but it's not a. I don't want to generalize it. Yesterday, I was dealing with a student who got 100% Maharashtra government scholarship, whose visa was refused to study at a group of eight, University of Sydney, and I don't have a problem in mentioning it because it had nothing to do with the university nor with the funding because it was 100% scholarship from Maharashtra government, including funding for living expenses and travel costs. So then, if a visa is refused, then I think that's a bit unfortunate because it's got nothing to do with the things. But overall, generally things have not been that bad. In recent months, there have been a spate of visa refusal that we are hearing about. Some of it is justified. And I've had discussions with members from the Home Affairs. I've also had discussions with some of the leading agencies. While in front, we do talk about visa should be very transparent, but we are faced with a lot of new kinds of fraud in the market. And especially, there are two types of fraud which have hit the student audience in a big way. And this is largely thanks to a decline of Canada in recent years. Because what happens, one destination declines, those students start looking at other countries. So Canada has gone down very sharply. And if you look at it, what has gone down in Canada is not the university sector. Yes, university sector has gone down,
Yeah.
but it's largely
Colleges.
the, you can say, the bottom of the pyramid, which is like really broken down. Now, where did those students go the moment Canada went down? They started going to United Kingdom. They started going to Australia, but Australia was a little bit more high on financial requirements. So, how do you meet the financial requirements? You cook up funds. So, either you buy fake financials, or there is a new ingenious scam called search funds, which has taken up, and it's very difficult to track. So let's say if Shrikant is with James Cook University, a student applies and says, "Oh, I've got $50,000 in my bank account." Now that $50,000 is in a genuine bank account of student's father, but it's actually not the father. It's the same name of someone else, which these people are able to find a bank statement which matches. So you really can't verify. And this is called search fund. So if you look at North India, a lot of names are very similar and very common. So like almost every family has a Ajit Singh and something else, and Akash Deep Singh, and these people find genuine bank statements, but just not of that student's relative. So this is a new kind of scam currently being we are dealing with, and we found about 10 such manufacturers or brokers who help you find those funds held anywhere else. So now I don't want to take the discussion towards that because it's an issue. But sometimes Home Affairs also has a tough. Home Affairs is the visa office, has a tough role to play Not every student is being interviewed. It's physically not possible to interview. So they look at algorithms, they look at where the student originates from. And the algorithm, as you know, you guys are all tech guys, looks at certain traits in an application. Where is that student from? What was his background? And then tries to put it in some basket, which is like a low risk or a high risk. So say a student coming from Calcutta may be deemed as low risk, but maybe even a better student coming from Amritsar might just get deemed as high risk. So that's something which is happening as we speak. But as Shrikant said, overall the visa success is still high, and these will change. These will get corrections over a period of time. Now coming to the question of UK, because I don't want to leave that question out, Saurabh. You went to UK as a student, and I value that. My father went to London School of Economics in his time, and in fact, behind me you can find it. I'm actually sitting at my father's desk, and he's very proud of his London School of testimony. He's 88 years, and my certificate doesn't hang anywhere, but he's very proud of his testimonials. But what I'm trying to get at here is UK, unfortunately, has got exploited pretty badly in recent years. And I'm not just talking about what will happen next year. Now, if you look at two changes which UK has brought about. One, reducing the post-study work from 2 years to 18 months. Now, it may not sound too big. You may say, okay, just 18 months is not much. But there's nothing that 18 months lead you to. In Australia, you have a post-study work, and if you have a skill in shortage, you can apply for either a work visa or you can apply for permanent residency. But in UK, there is no such pathway. Saurabh and I argued this at all the time. You need to be in UK now. It used to be 5 years. Now it is 10 years before you have a hope of getting what is equivalent to a residency there. Now, the way I look at it is that it's what happens to a student. A student invests in education in UK, 1.5 years of post-study work, and then it's tata bye-bye. Very few, rare few will be able to get sponsored by someone at a certain level and can find a way into the system. Now, why I'm mentioning this? The kind of students that Australia attracted, or Canada attracted, or New Zealand attracted, or Ireland attracted, or even US attracted. And if you look at Trump's statements recently, where he said it'll be a pity if students coming to our universities we cannot use them if they've got those skills. UK has been silent on that. The problem with UK is, and I'll say it without any, because believe me, UK is a very major student destination for my company's students also, and I work very hard on it, and I believe so. So it has about 24 Russell Group universities. Australia has only 8 group of 8 universities. So if you ask me, it has 3 times more group of 8 equivalent universities. Correct? Then you have over 200 or 300 universities which are recruiting internationally. In the last few years, it just opened the floodgates. The visa system is the easiest, fine, but it shouldn't be that easy too. It is anyone who has 28 days funds can get a visa into UK. There is no question. 28 days. I and Shrikant both operate in this market. There'll be hundreds of people from whom I can borrow the money and put it in my bank account for 28 days. So the point here is the system in UK it needs to be better.
Bit easy. Yeah.
Bit better devised to, and there has to be a pathway for high skilled graduating students who can find employment around the world. Otherwise, return on investment question will come back to bite even with UK.
But what do you tell to those students and parents who would like to go for a year? They are only focused on ROI. And when they compare that, okay, Australia need to go for 2 years.
Tell me,
UK for 1 year.
Yeah, perfect. I go for 1 year and I study at London School of Economics or KBU, and also my ROI will be very high. But there are tons of other universities who won't be even heard of by the next door placement company in India. Or there are many universities with the franchise campuses all across UK which are recruiting from India who are not even heard of. So how do you answer that question there? Also at the same time, also at the same time, have you seen the kind of students UK recruited in the last 3 years? I can send you scores of video of agents in smallest of rural pockets in North India lining up hundreds of students with their visas at the end for their pre-departures. Almost all of them will have no scope of even finding a job in Hisar or Rohtak with that qualification. So
No,
and Saurabh, this is I say it because I tell the same thing to the
no, I
universities
agree.
and the
I totally
policymakers.
agree with you. Yeah, totally
And,
agree.
and and then I ask somebody, why are they being sent? And this is a very important question. Where are those students who went over the last 3 years? Because during COVID, UK was the first country to open up, right? It started getting the students while Australia was still closed and New Zealand was closed for good. Where were those students going? They were all going to UK. Where are those students? Have you looked at where they are? They have used human smuggling routes to reach US also. The flights which have Trump sent to India to you can chop this off and edit it if you want, but which they sent back to Amritsar had students whose parents didn't even know that the kid had gone to US. The kid had gone to UK but was being repatriated from US there. Donkey routes, which ED, I'm told yesterday, was raiding in North India. The donkey agents, the route was through UK to Mexico, to Panama, to US. And the first route they were making was on the student visa.
I agree.
So,
And it's a
so,
facts.
so Gaurav, I'll tell you, if UK has to really, because I personally think UK as a destination was never on migration. It was all on quality of education. Students who would go to study and come back. But then you don't have that many students to send to UK. You have to scale down the numbers. You have to focus
Absolutely.
on, as Rishi Sunak mentioned when he was the Prime Minister, only on universities that deliver UK quality education.
It's spot on, Ravi. Actually, you made some really compelling points. I know Saurabh's going to be he'll probably continue to prosecute the case of UK, but quite honestly, I think Ravi has cooked UK, and this can be the punchline for this series. It's anyway Oz versus the world, but I think UK is cooked, Saurabh. I'm sorry to tell you at the moment, and there are a lot of things happening in Australia. Like Ravi mentioned about documents being cooked up, and that's how I came up with this thing that UK actually got cooked now. But moving on from this, and I'm just mindful of time, therefore, looking at the bigger picture and going forward, Australia having lots of its advantages and so on. 2032 Olympics being hosted in Brisbane, in Queensland. Ravi, what do you think? How is that going to propel that growth, or how is that going to add an extra sort of flair to Australia as a study destination?
And just a minute before, I just realized that, so we all three have one more thing common. So you have study from Brisbane, Queensland. Of course, Ravi, so you've been, to Bond University. And my first, people believe that I started this company with UK as a destination. Not many people are aware that my first international trip for this, this business, I landed at Brisbane. I still remember it. December
Are you changing
2013.
sides now, Saurabh? Is that
No,
what
no,
you're
I'm
saying?
not. No, no, I'm not taking. I'm not changing. See, I'm neutral. I'm not taking any
Fair
side
enough.
only. I'm
Fair
neutral.
enough. Are you
You
neutral?
know,
Yeah, right.
yeah, I'm
Fair
neutral,
enough.
right? Yeah.
Yeah,
But yeah, back to you.
see, sort of, I think, first and foremost, I think I'll go back to Shrikant's question. Any major activity which happens around the world, it requires certain kind of skilled professionals at that point of time. And I'll take you, he's talking about the Olympics, and I'll talk about Christchurch earthquake. There was an earthquake that happened in Christchurch a few years ago. And believe me, immediate turn, Christchurch, a lot of students stopped going, and then suddenly they started coming back to do courses in project management, engineering, because the city was being built again with the infrastructure, road, and this is when you need skilled manpower. What happens is, if you really go back again, the biggest growth that UK had was around London Olympics. And interestingly, Shrikant, I know sometimes having a very uh, long memory is a problem. But then I found that in 2009, Australia went down because there was some negative media reports around students attack. But
races.
that suited London in UK in a very big way, because UK was looking for temporary workers as well as permanent workers. And what happens with an activity like Olympics? You just don't have the manpower even during the event. Forget about in the run up to the event. Now the advantage which London had was London was still a big city. But a city like Brisbane, which is got to have stadiums coming up, hotels requiring people, there'll be a road network being made. There will be people all over the place. We saw that with Commonwealth Games in Melbourne at one point of time, and now we've had Commonwealth Games in many cities in Australia, including in Gold Coast, right next to Brisbane. But Olympics is something else altogether. And people are looking forward to this Olympics happening in Brisbane, because if you really think of it, the next Olympic after Brisbane is likely to be in India. It could be in 2036, could be Ahmedabad, could be hosting the Olympics, at least it's in the race. Now, when you really think of it, there's a lot of spotlight going to be on Brisbane and Australia, and it requires skilled manpower. So, if students can plan or look at planning, then of course, I don't know about all cities in Australia, but certainly Queensland would benefit largely from being in the spotlight. Now, Shrikant, the advantage is every country has certain cities which people have heard of more in India. In Australia, it is Melbourne and Sydney, when you think of it. In Nepal, it is Sydney and Melbourne. In Bangladesh, it's Sydney and Melbourne. In Sri Lanka, it's Melbourne and Sydney. In Bhutan, it is Perth and Canberra. So what happens is there are cities which people tend to have first recall around. If you look at the backdrop that both Saurabh and Shrikant have chosen, it has the Opera House behind.
Hmm.
Okay, so that is the symbol for
Nominates to
Australia,
Australia.
right? So without that, Australia is incomplete. So now Brisbane will also get it's an opportunity for Brisbane to rise there. And for this, Shrikant, is the universities have a role, but also the city has a role. Unfortunately, to many places, there's nothing known as Study Brisbane. There is Study Queensland. But Brisbane as a word has to rise, and people have to think about it. You have some fine universities which will be attractive. So that's the pitch about Olympics coming up there. But between now and Olympics, there are many other activities where Australia and India will also continue to be in focus. Indian students are turning away from the US. Quality Indian students are turning away from the US. For them, Australian universities, at least the better ranked ones, become the first option. Canada is down, then Australia is a better option for those looking at skilled immigration. Then you've got New Zealand, which is trying to go up, but New Zealand as a country is very small. So, I mean, even if they have some growth, Australia will have a much bigger growth right next door. All this talk about new destinations like Dubai and Europe and Malta and Spain and all that. Believe me, these are all for a period of time. Let those universities and the countries enjoy for the sunshine while the sun is there. But this is largely the students who couldn't go to Canada are looking at options at low cost and finding ways into places. These are not full-fledged study destinations, because the Indian students going to Germany are not really going to public universities. They're going to private universities in Germany. Those who are going to Dubai are going into foreign university campuses in Dubai, not necessarily any Dubai-based university. So when you think of it in the larger context, it is going to remain. Australia is got to be celebrated over the next few years.
Then okay, let me have my turn now. Then why Australian governments and universities are not investing enough in the infrastructure, especially to accommodation? And that's what very close to
Or
me, right?
these things don't happen overnight. I can't even find manpower to renovate my house in Australia. You want me to create 200?
But it's been 30 years, 35 years I'm talking,
Come
right?
on,
Last
what
20
has
I'm
happened in
talking.
the past? I mean, here in India, we are blaming Nehru for everything. Come on, let the politicians have the
I'll
time.
answer that question for Saurabh. I think Saurabh, that's the, it's there's a plan, there's a universe plan And the
See,
reason
see,
why you were
as a businessman,
no,
as
no,
a
let me
platform,
finish this, Saurabh.
yeah,
The reason why you were
go ahead.
born, the reason why you have come up with this university living, you are going to be responsible to solve that problem.
Totally
So
agree.
I'll put it back on you. The accommodation providers need to innovate and do things that will promise the government that there's an alibi who can support them in that in fixing that challenge for Australia. But very valid question, or jokes apart, very valid question. We face that challenge all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think
But
it will have to be done in partnership with private entities.
totally,
I mean, even when we were a student, things like university living, or forget about even any individual players like Scape or Igloo or anything, didn't really exist in our
exactly.
time.
Yeah.
We either stayed in the university or
Halls.
residence or rented a place nearby. So at least this area has got a bit more, you can say, corporatized or slightly
Visibility, exactly. Yeah, people are talking about
organized.
accommodation at least.
Yeah, but I think there is a gap here, Saurabh, which I would want you to focus on. Our Indian students are looking at low cost accommodation. They are looking at accommodation which they can find otherwise. They are looking at price range of $200 to $250 a week,
Yeah.
$300 a week. The accommodation that is being created is at a much higher price point. They don't need the meals being provided. They want to
Yeah.
cook on their own. Their food habits are different. They don't mind two people sharing a room. So
Yeah.
these things, there's a bit of a gap here, and this is why sometimes our Indian students don't actively use the accommodation which
Yeah.
is being provided. And I'll tell you, I'll go back to this. There are universities with accommodation which doesn't get full at all.
Yeah.
I can name ANU as an example. It's a group of 8 university which has it guarantees accommodation to every international student coming into ANU. First year accommodation is guaranteed, but at a certain price point.
Yeah.
So that's really
No,
where
totally
it.
with you. And this is where our model for unionist. I not don't want to integrate and promote university living. And you both are aware what university living up to, and I'm up to. And I always reach out to Ravi, Sushil, so many of university in Australia, because I always find Australia very interesting, and I genuinely believe. In fact, on air I'm talking. Whenever I see my daughters going for undergrad, probably going to be Australia, UK, or Dubai. At least at this point in time.
Sort of, wherever your daughter goes, it'll be a different world at that point of time, and you'll be
Yes.
far more informed. But I'll tell you, Australia is at least 10 to 15 years ahead of even US at this point of time. None of these countries have anything called ESOS or equivalent of ESOS. ESOS Act protects. Why haven't aggregators done so well in Australia, as they have done well? They have done in
That's
UK
that's
and
Ravi's
Canada.
favorite topic. Go
No,
ahead.
no, 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 no. But come on, it is my favorite because the
Yeah,
government has
yeah,
certain regulations. There are universities who are using aggregators, but they still have to certain accountability. They have to pin the aggregators onto something else.
yeah.
There is a ESOS Act. In fact, last 2 years, Australia has been only discussing ESOS Act. Now, a
Yeah, what
national
is that?
program.
What is that, Ravi? I mean, for the
Australian
better understanding
Parliament
of.
passed the new version of ESOS Act. ESOS is Education Services for Overseas Students Act, which decides how universities operate and recruit international students. In this first round, there has been much more clarity around commissions. There has been clarity around definition of education agents, and there is many other things. And it's being followed with something called National Code, which should hit us just as we turn into the new year, which is most likely to be implemented from 1st of October, which will possibly put some more restrictions there. Now, you might say, oh, they're putting so many restrictions, but at least there are some regulations. So, none of these countries have any regulation. US and Canada don't even have a peak education department. There is, like in Australia, we have
I agree.
AEI, or in Britain, you got a British Council. There's nothing in Canada. And there is nothing in US. You've got Education USA doing its own things, and there is US Commercial Services doing something else for education. But there's no body. That's where I was part of the formation of AIRC, which was helped put together. And we are still deciding whether universities allow commissions or they don't allow commissions. So when you think of it, there's no such body present there. In UK, no one listens to British Council. There's no such nothing happening as such. At least in Australia, there is some regulation around things. A migration advisor in Australia is very regulated. Only a Mara agent can do it. One who's regulated by the migration body. So when you think of it, see, everything has a problem. In India also, we've got good
But tell me
doctors
one
and good
thing.
bad
Sorry,
doctors.
sorry, sorry. I need to intervene here. In spite of so many regulations, still the kind of frauds you are talking. Why that is happening? Is it because too
Tell
much of
me.
regulation?
No, 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 no. In India also, we've got, and that's exactly what I was saying. We have good doctors and bad doctors, right? We have regulations, but there are doctors who will do anything you feel like. But if somebody has done something, there is a body which can act on it.
No. No.
Right. There are good lawyers and bad lawyers too, because in any society, you need
Yeah.
both sides to
To
happen.
balance out the society. Yeah.
Absolutely. But I think largely speaking, in Australia, there is a lot more options for international students. International students who have any grievance can go up. Every university is an equal opportunity place. Students also have an option to go to the ombudsman, which is very active. Even if a student gets an unfavorable visa outcome when they are in Australia, they apply to ombudsman and it can be corrected. Or the minimum wages act in Australia is very strong. International students working in Australia have the highest minimum wage of any country. Take a look at do you know what's in the UK? I'm not trying to put on UK,
Yeah,
but
no,
it's
no, no, of course.
how
It's now,
how much
yeah,
is
it's
in
now, yeah, it's
yeah, how
now
much?
around, yeah, in the range of 12 to 16 pounds per week.
Right, and for the where they'll get 12 to 16, that's student. This is not the minimum, by the way. This is what an average what
Yeah,
they
yeah,
earn in Australia. They would probably be earning between 25 and 40
20, yeah.
Australian dollars. And when you really think of it, and you look at what it is in US, you can't even work off campus. Here, you
Yeah.
can work anywhere. So when you really put all that together, Australia is a great package to offer to a student. Your topic was decoding Australia, and I'm trying to look at. Unfortunately, I don't get to tell all this to a student because I cannot put
Yeah,
down
yeah,
any one
yeah, yeah.
destination to another. But the point here is UK, US, Canada, they have a lot to learn from it. I don't know whether you picked it up. Trump mentioned they want to put together the point system for migration like Australia. UK is working on a point system for migration like Australia. So when you really think of it, there's a lot it can teach, lot we can learn. And in Australia, I keep telling Australians, we can learn a lot from the New Zealanders. You know something? I keep telling them the number of policies in New Zealand is better than Australia. And I keep telling them.
And I
So,
think it's
yeah, go
no,
on.
so pretty much it is what it is. I think Saurabh, what's happening right now is Australia is on that sort of learning curve. It is ahead 10, 15 years, but it's trying out things, it's innovating. And I think the only thing which I would say is government may need to work little more closely with the industry, with thought leaders who've been in Australia for 20, 30 years, because some of those flaws or loopholes in the policy can actually be fixed. It's not that they're impossible to fix, but it's just that the listening ears need to be a little bit sharp. I don't want to be criticized by saying that, but look, fact is a fact.
Your
I talk about
citizenship
this.
won't be revoked, right? Unlike what is happening in US, at least in Australia, there's no danger of, if you are
There
criticizing
isn't.
someone, yeah. So that's
Look,
another,
I'm hoping not, I'm going to say. But at least the fact is, if you are speaking to points and making sense, there will be, some sort of acceptance. So there is feedback being given from the industry. ARI is doing an excellent job in that space, and I think I always commend ARI for only reason that globally, I work with agents and associations globally. The work that ARI is doing, I want to mention this here, is by far light years ahead of what any other agencies, associations are doing in channeling the policies in the right direction. So it may take time, but I think value proposition for Australia still remains largely far ahead of others.
And it's good that we have differing views. And I think, I don't know, you must have met many Australians. Australians don't mind a criticism. If something is, because we are not criticizing the individual, we are
yeah,
criticizing the
yeah,
policy.
Yeah.
We have nothing against an individual. Believe me, I personally work with both sides of the government. And we have friends in both sides of the government. I think eventually, I think we have to be able to show if there's a loophole. Like I was just talking about a loophole, how there's something called search funds. Come on, these are very ingenious frauds. I mean, how do you find solutions to it?
I agree. Totally agree. Totally. In fact, this is what I like about this discussion because these are not scripted. These are not, all the fancy, flowery, words and everything is not hunky dory, and that's a fact. And in fact, we don't discuss if we don't discuss this, people will not think about it. And if they are not thinking, leave about changing it. It will not even, be on table to talk about. Yeah. So
I
yeah.
think 2026, sort of for universities, the students obviously need to plan their accommodation and things like that. And you mentioned it correctly. It's a factor because that's exactly where the politics in Australia is. If universities are able to create enough accommodation and facilities for their students, then the pressure on the accommodation of what is being used by general public goes down, and I think criticism will change. But these things don't happen overnight.
It will
It
take time. Yeah.
takes some time.
No, absolutely. In fact, the thing which we are talking about accommodation, I always say that no one is sleeping on the road. It's all about awareness, nurturing them, and telling the right thing, and it happens over a period of time. The way you guys have built Australia, name on the map, and you guys have studied there, and in spite of that, you don't shy away to criticize which needs to be criticized and appreciate what needs to be appreciated. On that note, I leave it on Shrikant to wrap it up, and then probably I'll do a closing comment.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think firstly, it was a very engaging discussion. There are at least a dozen topics that I would love to discuss, but I know we all have professional commitments, and given that we are at the end of the year, we also have personal commitments. So definitely, closing it here. But firstly, thank you very, very much, Ravi. You are obviously the first, part of the first episode and the first guest. We couldn't have Kevin, unfortunately, because of some tech issues at his end. But thank you very much for joining us in this dedicated show called Decoding Australia, and the very first episode, Oz versus the World. Pleasure to be hearing from you, and thank you, Saurabh, for beautifully co-hosting this podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah, so this was the first conversation in Australia recorded, as Shrikant mentioned, and we will continue to breaking down the study destination with clarity, context, and re-experience. Thank you for watching, and keep sharing your views and your feedback because we are just getting started. Of course, the theme is how we decode Australia. I'll ensure that I'll maintain that neutrality. And don't get into a trap of this Australian which are always I mean they speak their mind, mate. Lovely.
All good. All good. Thank you very much, guys.